crab is a crustacean from the Pacific Ocean. It is a delicacy with succulent flesh and an exquisite flavor.
I ordered a Kona crab online, and today I'm going to go ahead, unbox it, pick it, and put it in a recipe to let you know if Alexa got the description. Now, I got these crabs from efish.com, and they always do a good job of packing them up. They always come in these styrofoam coolers, and they normally have a good amount of cool packs on top of them. And today, it was no exception. It came overnight, had these 4 cool packs on it, and they were still frozen solid. Whoa. These are like nothing I've ever seen before, guys. Oh my gosh. Look at that. You can see they just are past. Actually, they're pretty cold right now. But with them, what they were saying is the body or the legs aren't where the meat are. It's all in the body. Some of these are actually eaten raw too. Of course, I'm not going to try to eat it raw right now, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to steam these up. Let me just take a look at how crazy those eyes look on that thing. Get my gross finger out of it. Just take a look how crazy this looks. I'm not sure, like it's not a traditional crab where there's like male or female. And like the pinchers and stuff, just wild. Look at the swim fins. And there's all these little hairs everywhere too. That is one of the craziest crabs I think I've ever seen. Now in Hawaii, these are actually called Kona crabs, like I said before, but in Australia, they're called spanner crabs. And I had no clue why they were called spanner crabs before. I thought it was just from like the area that they were located or something to do with their shell or something like that. But it wasn't until I watched another video to figure out that their claws look like wrenches. In Australia, they call wrenches spanners, so that's why I got the name spanner crab from the Australians. Like I said, they didn't arrive alive. I think they actually still might be alive because there's a little bit of movement in the legs. Like it's not ideal, but if I like touch certain things, see how it kind of bounces back? See how the eye bounces back? That means it's alive still. I mean, just a wild looking crab. Okay. I think one of the things that threw me off the most about this crab was that it was already red. These are not cooked crabs. These are live crabs that are red already. I'm so used to crabs being cooked and then turning red that having them this red before they're cooked was absolutely crazy. Now to cook them, I did it pretty simple. I just got some water up to a boil and then I was just going to steam them. Now, they're pretty small crabs, and I thought I could fit them both in this pot, but actually it was pretty hard, especially because the little thing at the top there just kept making it so I couldn't close the lid. And I thought I would be able just to break that piece off, but their shells are actually really hard to break. So I basically had to just kind of shove it down there in the best way I could and finally get the lid on top of there because that thing was not budging. So I got it on there tight enough, and just like any crab, I steamed them for about 17 minutes or so. Sometimes it can be 15, sometimes it can be 20, but 17 minutes, and I tested a leg to see if the meat looked nice and cooked inside of it, and of course it did. Now it was time to pull these things out. Now, I did not know what to expect when I got these out. A lot of people said, like Alexa, that these are some of the best tasting crabs that they ever had, and people compared it to like a lobster meat, but way more tender. I started off with the claw, and I was actually pretty surprised with how light it felt. I didn't think much meat was going to come out of there, but I started with that base of the claw anyways, just because I thought it would be a good place to get a chunk of meat. Now, the people that sold me this warned me I wouldn't get that typical good crab claw pull kind of deal, but I was able to get some good meat out of there using my utensil, and I was excited to try this because it looked really similar to blue crab meat with its firmness and stuff like that. And the taste, honestly, was super close as well. If I could compare it, it would be a mix between blue crab and lobster. At least that's what the claw tasted like.
That is really good.
Now it was time to get into the body meat, and I'm going to be 100% honest. Anytime I pick a new crab, I get a little nervous about how to pick it. I'm really good at picking blue crabs, but other crab, I just don't know the right ways to do it, and this spanner crab or Kona crab really gave me some fits. I tried pretty hard to actually peel the top shell off with just my hands and tried every single angle I possibly could, and eventually I ended up almost cutting my fingers just trying to get the top of the crab off. Now, I got a little resourceful by the end of it when I figured I couldn't do it by hand and got my seafood pliers back out and stuck them right into the base of the shell and then used them almost as like a pry. Like I even tried to use the claw to open it up and it just wasn't working. So at this point, I realized the best way to do it was to use some tools, and like I said, got out those pliers, and it became a lot easier. Now, I'm not sure why it's so hard to open these, but I'm telling you right now, if you're going to get these crabs, maybe you have some like crazy hands that can just open it up, but I really needed some help. The color inside the body reminded me of like a lobster tail, and even the texture of it, looking at it right there, it looks like it's a lobster tail trapped inside of a crab. Now, like I said, anytime I eat a new crab, I always get a little nervous about how I'm going to pick it, and this time was no different. I tried to figure out like the best way to crack the body to be able to get some of the meat, and my first attempt at cracking it only gave me like this tiny little piece. So I went back in it and just started ripping it apart the best I can, and finally got a really good chunk of meat. It felt more like blue crab, but again, it had the same color as lobster, and this tasted even better than the claw. It was a perfect mix between like a back fin of a blue crab and that like more sweetness of a lobster.
That is a delicious, delicious crab.
And I was pretty excited to try it out in a recipe. Now, like I said, I finally figured out how to pick this thing. And once I started working through it, I found it easier than picking, say, like a blue crab that has lots of compartments. You can get pretty big chunks of meat as you're going through it. I did find out, though, that the legs and the claws had some meat, but they were definitely harder to pick than, say, like a blue crab or even a lobster legs or stuff like that. But that being said, too, there was plenty of meat in there to make it worth doing it. Now, after picking out the whole Kona crab, I probably got about a cup of meat, which would have been plenty for the recipe that I was planning on doing, because all I wanted to do was make some sort of sushi dish. Now, I didn't feel like making a roll itself, so I looked online and people were making these like sushi crunch wrap supreme kind of deals. So I made some sushi rice, and then for the crunchiness of this, I decided to use some fried onions on one side, and basically you're going to put different ingredients in each square. So this was going to be the fried onion side, along with some of that Kona crab meat on top of there. And then my thought was I was going to make this as like a California roll. So top that with some crab meat. And then next, of course, a California roll is going to need some cucumber. Now, I left the skin on the cucumber because I do like the cucumber skin, but in this recipe, it might have been better to take the cucumber skin off, kind of like you get in a California roll, but that's really personal preference and 100% up to you. I found it better to slice them pretty thin because you're going to want to spread them out and make it basically like one even layer of cucumbers down there, making sure you don't go too far over the line. Next, of course, you need some ripe avocado. Again, just spread out a little bit so it can cover up that whole square. I put some sriracha on there just for a little bit of kick and a little bit of, spice in there as well. And then you just start folding it. I found this part pretty interesting because I wanted it to be a lot tighter, almost like a sushi roll, but it never really turned out to be that way. Stuff was falling out and stuff like that, so it wasn't the best presentation. But after getting it all folded up, I cut it in half, and the cross section actually looked pretty good. I'm not sure what to call this monstrosity, but it was definitely time to give it a taste. And here we go.
Messy, but good.